I woke up one morning to find my truck gone, yanked right out of my driveway in the middle of the night. Not stolen, towed. By order of my neighborhood's HOA. The worst part, it wasn't some random rule enforcement. No, this was personal. The president of our HOA, Karen Whitmore, had decided to make me her target, and she wasn't going to stop until I either bent to her will or broke completely. That's the day I realized this wasn't about rules or community standards, it was about control. My name's Daniel Price. I'm 38. I work construction and I moved to Maplewood Estates in Houston for one reason: to give my daughter Emily a safe, stable place after her mom passed away. I thought I was buying peace of mind, a clean neighborhood, decent schools, no drama. Instead, what I got was a war zone, one dressed up in manicured lawns and pastel paint jobs with a tyrant in heels patrolling the sidewalks. Karen introduced herself the way dictators do, smiling at first, then setting fire to everything behind that smile. She was 45, always in some crisp pastel suit, always carrying a binder like it was a weapon. The first time she showed up at my door, she wasn't delivering a welcome basket. She was demanding that I tear down the little wooden shed I'd built in my backyard. It wasn't some mansion extension, just a tool shed under the square footage that even the HOA bylaws said required approval. I pointed that out to her, showed her the actual rule in writing. She stared at me like I was a child, interrupting her, then leaned in with this sharp little smile. You'll learn soon enough. Around here, I decide what's allowed. At first, I tried to brush it off. Painted the shed a nicer color, thought maybe that would smooth things over. But the next week, I started getting letters. Fines for grass being too tall, I measured it wasn't. Fines for my truck being a commercial vehicle when it's the same Ford pickup I've driven for years. Even a warning about my porch light being out of character with the community aesthetic. I laughed the first time. By the fifth notice, I wasn't laughing anymore. Then came the truck. It was a Tuesday morning. I'd worked late the night before, left the pickup in the driveway. At 8 a.m., I walked outside to find it hooked up to a tow truck, Karen standing nearby with her arms crossed like a queen, watching her subjects obey. I ran out, waving my hands, asking what the hell was going on. The tow driver held up paperwork signed by Karen herself. Violation, commercial vehicle. My mouth went dry. That truck wasn't just transportation, it was my livelihood. Without it, I couldn't get to job sites. Without it, I couldn't feed Emily. I begged. I shouted. It didn't matter. The driver looked ashamed, but Karen stood there smiling for the neighbors who'd come outside to watch. Some even recorded. She leaned toward me as the tow truck pulled away and whispered, "Maybe you should consider if this neighborhood is really right for you." The humiliation hit harder than the $750 it cost me to get my truck back. Harder than the lost 2 days of work that cost me a contract. That night, sitting in my backyard, I felt crushed. My daughter was asleep upstairs, and I kept asking myself, what if Karen's right? What if I can't beat her? Maybe I should just sell, cut my losses, move somewhere less toxic. For the first time, I wondered if I'd made a mistake bringing Emily here. I felt like I was failing her. But then, something happened. My neighbor, Mark Reynolds, who mostly kept to himself, came over. He's older, retired. He sat down beside me and said quietly, "You're not the first you know. She's forced people out before. She nearly pushed me to sell too, but I kept records. Everything she's done, every shady call she's made. If you want to fight her, I'll help you." He handed me a folder thick with documents. Old letters, notes, even receipts from the towing company showing kickbacks Karen had taken for every vehicle she had hauled away. My chest tightened. Suddenly, this wasn't just about my shed or my truck. This was about a pattern her using the HOA like her own private racket. The final straw came a few nights later. I looked out my window and saw Karen standing in my yard, phone raised, taking pictures of Emily playing basketball. I stormed out, furious. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" She didn't flinch. She just smiled coldly and said, "Evidence. Unsafe play areas. I'll be sure to include this in the next violation report." She turned her back on me like I wasn't even worth the courtesy of eye contact. My hands shook with rage. That was it. She'd gone after my daughter, and I knew I wasn't going anywhere. I called a lawyer I knew from an old job. I reached out to a reporter I'd worked with once during a safety inspection story, and I started documenting every move Karen made. The showdown came at the monthly HOA meeting. The room was packed, dozens of neighbors, most of them tired of Karen but too afraid to speak. She stood at the front like she owned the place, rattling off a list of my infractions. She called me a troublemaker, said I was lowering property values, that I was a threat to the community spirit. People were murmuring, nodding, some looking uncomfortable. My palms were sweaty, but I stood. My voice shook at first, then steadied. I held up Mark's folder. Everything Karen just said about me. That's projection. Because here's what she's been doing to all of us. I laid out copies of the tow company invoices, highlighted where she got her 20% cut. I played a recording I'd taken of her trespassing on my property, laughing as she took pictures of my kid. The room went silent except for Karen's sharp breathing. She tried to shout me down. These are lies, taken out of context. But then one brave neighbor stood and said, "No, he's right." She fined me for painting my fence off-white instead of cream. Another chimed in. She threatened me with foreclosure if I didn't replace my driveway. It was like a dam breaking. Years of frustration pouring out all at once. Karen's face twisted red with fury. She slammed her hand on the table and snapped, "I did it to protect our property values. If you people can't handle living up to standards, maybe you shouldn't live here at all." That sentence was her undoing. The reporter in the back caught every word on camera. Neighbors gasped, some booed. The board members, even her so-called allies, shifted uncomfortably. Within minutes, a motion was raised to remove her as president. The vote was quick, decisive. Karen lost. I'll never forget the look in her eyes as she realized she wasn't untouchable anymore. She stood there shaking, trying to argue, but no one was listening. Security escorted her out of the room. For the first time since I'd moved in, the neighborhood was quiet, not peaceful, not yet, but quiet in the way a storm is when it's finally blown itself out. And that's where my story ends. Not with balloons or high fives, not with some cheesy celebration. Just with the tyrant stripped of her power, her voice drowned out by the very people she'd tried to control. Because sometimes the loudest victory isn't a cheer, it's the silence that follows when a bully finally falls.